Hello, this is Mike Dixon, and this is the Bolivia Baptist Wednesday night Bible study for Wednesday, August 12th, 2020. I remember when I was a teenager, the big thing was being nonconformist. You had to be different. Everybody had to be cool. The great irony is that they were the crowd. 90% of my school was nonconformist. So by being nonconformist, you were actually conforming. It's funny that even though humans are predators, we still have that herd mentality. Why do we want to follow the crowd? Because it's safe. It's dangerous to go against the grain. It's dangerous to go against the crowd. You stick out when you stand up. And it takes courage to do that. It takes courage to do what's right when everyone else is doing what's wrong. Elijah had waited 3 years for this confrontation. Elijah, one man, was about to take on the king, 450 pagan priests, and the god Baal himself. Let's read 1 Kings 18, 1 through 40. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Now, this isn't the Obadiah who wrote the book Obadiah. This is a different person. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. Ahab had said to Obadiah, go through the land, all the springs and the valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive so we not have to kill any of our animals. So they divided the land they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said, is it really you, my lord Elijah? Yes, he replied. Go tell your master, Elijah is here. Verse 16, so Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, is that you troubler of Israel? I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves first, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then when you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response, no one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until the blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time of the evening sacrifice. When there was no response, no one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it long enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. I think that's around 24 pounds. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on wood. Then he said to them, fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Now, you may ask yourself, there's a drought. Where did he get this from? Mount Carmel is right next to the Mediterranean Sea, so it's probably salt water. Verse 34, do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a third time, he ordered, and they did it a third time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that the people will know that you, Lord, are God and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God! Then Elijah commanded them, Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away. They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. In verses 1 through 16, you read about Obadiah. Would you characterize him as courageous or cowardly? Well, I think he's pretty courageous. He knew that they were killing the prophets of God, and he saved 100 of them. And when I read that story, it reminded me of the people in Germany who saved the Jews when Hitler was going out and killing them. And I always ask myself, would I have done the same thing? Would I risk my family's life to hide a Jewish family who's being hunted down and killed, knowing that if I get caught, I'm going to get killed? It takes a lot of courage to do that when everyone else is doing the opposite. When 90% of the country is harboring Jews, there's probably not going to be a lot of penalty to pay. But if you're the only one, you can be certain that the punishment is going to be severe. Would you do the same thing today? If you saw a group of people beating up an elderly person in the street, would you jump in and stop it? Would you risk your life knowing what's going to happen to you? Or how about when your church has accepted doctrine that you know is wrong? Would you stand up by yourself and tell the whole congregation that they're wrong? It takes a lot of courage to do that. If you had been told to face Ahab after 3.5 years of drought, how would you have felt? How would you have felt if you were Elijah? Would you have been scared? What would have given you confidence, though? How about the 3.5 years of faith lessons? Remember the ravens? Feeding him twice a day, the food always showing up. Or how about the widow and her jars of flour and oil that filled up every single night? Ahab called Elijah the troubler of Israel. Why is that? Why did Ahab call him that? What Ahab was saying is that Elijah had brought that drought on, that Elijah was doing something evil, that he was hurting people. But that was wrong. Elijah explained the problems differently. What did he say? In verse 18, he says, I have not made trouble for Israel. You and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. So what he was saying is, this isn't me causing this drought because I don't like you. It is your actions. It's because you have turned your back on God. How might those words in verse 18 relate to some of the problems in our nation and culture today? There are some theologians that don't believe these things happen anymore. They believe that Israel was in a covenant with God, and this disaster when they turned their back on God and blessings when they faced Him only happens to Israel. It doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen in the modern world. I disagree with that completely. The church is in a covenant relationship with God. That's absolutely without a doubt. And if America is a nation filled with the church, then we as a nation, when we turn our back on God, are facing curses. And when we turn towards Him and do what is right, we certainly are blessed. You can see the beginning of our history from the foundation up until the mid-19th century. The mid-20th century, just how blessed we were. This little country became the world power. And that absolutely defies all logical explanation. Certainly, the older European kingdoms, with all of their history and all of their resources, should have grown over us, but they weren't. And I believe this is because we were a Christian nation, because the majority of the people here were believers, that the nation was going to church on Sunday, that there was morals and ethics, that people prayed and read their Bibles in their homes, that our Constitution is based upon God creating all equal. And when we turned our back on him in the 20th century, that coincided with our fall. I believe that the problems that we have today are because we've turned our back on God, the same as Israel. We are his people. The church is God's people, no different than Israel. There are false gods in this society that receive abundant attention and adoration, but they give no answers to life's problems, the same as Baal. We may not have idols of Baal, but we do have idols. What are some of those? Consider that. What are some of America's idols? Money, drugs, Hollywood media, for some, the government, for some, athletes. How do people sacrifice to these gods? What makes them their God? Well, they take God's place. What is God to us? He's our provider. He's our sustainer. He's who we go to when we have trouble. There are people who worship money, who live their life in a constant search for more of it because it gives them safety. It gives them peace. There are people that when they have trouble turn to drugs. And I don't mean just alcohol and heavy drugs, but prescription drugs. They take the place of God in our life, and we're going to face punishment for that. We're going to face punishment for that. On what basis does Elijah ask God to answer his prayer in verses 36 and 37? This is an interesting concept. Very, very important for us to understand as Christians. 36 and 37, look at what Elijah said. Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God, and I am only your servant. And the things I've done at your command. Right? Answer me, Lord, please, so that these people will know what? That you are God. How might his prayer change how you ask God to work in your life and in the world? We ask for God's glory. Before I get started on these lessons, before I press record, I pray every time. And what I pray is, God, let me make a difference in someone's life for your glory, not for my own. When I serve the Lord, what I'm trying to do is I hope that he is glorified. I hope that something I do, something that I say, turns someone towards him, away from me. I'm merely the servant that's bringing the paper. When I pray for my daughter's skin to be healed, it's for his glory so that she may praise God. It's never about us. Elijah's prayer is a model prayer for the Christian for everything that you ask. You do it so that God may be glorified. So God, heal that woman so that she will glorify you. And you see the difference between that prayer and the prayer of the healing pastor who's on stage in a $5,000 suit with people worshiping him. We pray so that God may be glorified. God forbid that anyone turn towards us. We want people to turn to it so that they will know you are God, is our prayer. Remember that and implement that into everything that you pray. It's for his glory. What has God used in your life to convince you that he is real and powerful? I want you to think about that. What are some of the things God has done in your walk to let you know that he is real and he is powerful? Take some time, even pause the video, take some time and remember some of the instances where God has showed up and to let you know, to put his hand on your shoulder and let you know, I'm here, right beside you. I'll never leave you. It wasn't Elijah that overcame those prophets. It was God. God overcame the prophets of Baal. But Elijah was ready to be used by God for his purpose. God needs courageous people today to pick up the banner, to lift others up, to lead. People not afraid to face the enemy, not afraid to stick out, who trust God to overcome. In order to have that kind of courage, in order to have that kind of effect, You need to see the fire of God's transforming power in your life. Ask God to help you remove whatever hinders His power and renewal in your life for His glory. That's all for today. I hope that you have a blessed rest of your week.